welcome back to the All Things Special About Education podcast. I am Shannon, the Executive Director at Kentucky IEP Advocate. I'm here again, still with Amber Devine Stinson, our speech therapy expert. Today, well, let's share a little, in case nobody heard it the last time, share a little about yourself.
Okay, I am Amber Devine Stinson. I'm a speech therapist here in Louisville, Kentucky. I've been practicing for almost 20 years. I was in the school system. I have been an independent contractor and ran a private practice, and currently work in an outpatient clinic serving autistic children, teens, some young adults, many of which are non-speaking or nonverbal, and use augmentative and alternative communication. Specifically, a lot of them are using speech devices. So it's kind of become a specialty of mine. I love it. Love giving kids ways to communicate.
So that is why we are here discussing today. Our topic overall is access to communication and the right to communicate with people. So tell us how that is framed out by your professional organization.
So my professional organization is the American Speech Language Hearing Association. We often refer to it as ASHA, ASHA.org. We'll put a link to that as well.
Yep,
for anyone who you can find a speech therapist on the website.
Oh yeah, good idea.
In your area. So one thing that ASHA has on their website is the Communication Bill of Rights. The Communication Bill of Rights was put out by the National Joint Committee, and that's what we're going to talk about today. It is, I think, a very good thing for parents to know about. And we'll also have a link, Shannon will have a link to a printable version so that you can take this with you when you go to an IEP meeting and ask questions.
Yes, because you are going to be hard pressed to find a way that communication is not necessary for education.
Correct.
I can't come up with one. I'm not sure that there is one.
I don't think there is.
Have to be able to communicate, number one, to show that you're understanding things in some way, to be able to document any sort of academic progress. You've got to be able to communicate that you understand what's going on. And also, when we talk about access to education, we're also talking about access to the educational experience, which isn't always sitting in a classroom, being in a classroom, actively doing English language arts, math, social studies, science, even related arts. It is also the time that you're spending in the cafeteria. It is also the time that you are on the playground. It is also when you are walking down the hallway. So it is also during extracurricular activities that are happening at school, sponsored by the school.
And when you're riding the bus.
Oh yes, good point. Excellent.
All kinds of communication happens on a bus.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yes. Okay, so do you want me just to kind of roll into this?
Yeah, let's talk the Communication Bill of Rights. There, you said 15 of them.
There's an introduction. There's 15, and then we'll kind of pause for each one if needed to comment. Either one of us.
Connect that back to education, because while Communication Bill of Rights is offered to humans, we are all in existence here. When we're talking about school and access to education, we are talking about the implications of this in a classroom and at a school. So
yes, and something that I would like, especially parents and professionals, I guess anybody listening, right, is when you are thinking of how your child communicates and is communicated with, is their method of communication being provided at school giving them each of these rights? Okay, so let's keep that in mind kind of as we go through them. And I think that'll help us kind of touch on them. But the introduction is that all people with a disability of any extent or severity have a basic right to affect, through communication, the conditions of their existence. Beyond this general right, a number of specific communication rights should be ensured in all daily interactions and interventions involving persons who have severe disabilities. Um, and so let's, kind of keeping in mind, for me, this is our children who are not necessarily communicating via just verbal speech. Okay.
Mhm.
So, to participate fully in communication interactions, each person has these fundamental rights for communication. Number one, the right to interact socially, maintain social closeness, and build relationships. Okay.
That is the educational experience.
Yes. That's what our kids are
Yeah.
doing every day, right?
Yep.
So, does their communication system allow them to interact socially with their peers and build relationships and friendships? Okay.
And in that situation, to think about the implications of that in a classroom. An example that we see more than I would like to say that we see is access to communication is so a Big Mac switch is something that therapists are using regularly. It is a switch that could be recorded with any sort of message that you want access by touch.
Yes.
So the Big Mac switch could be available and you could record a message. So maybe that will say like, "Hey, hi, good morning." Maybe it will say if you're doing a lesson about volcanoes or hurricanes, then you'll have some core vocabulary words. Maybe you have access to 3 of them and you've got 3 words that you could be using. Possibility of some picture cards that could offer access to participate in a lesson and you're pointing to the answer to the question. um, all tools that can be used for academics. But when that is your access to communication, how does that build relationships?
Right. If that's all you have.
Yes. And not these are not questions that a parent needs to answer. These are questions that you could very easily pose to the team if that is the level and amount of access that your child has to communicate. If you have a non-speaking child, if you have a minimally speaking or emerging speech, we're going to get to gatekeeping access to AAC. I cannot not talk about that. We're going to get to that
Rein it
probably
in.
later.
Keep it in. We're going to. Right.
Yes.
Right. So just keeping in mind the things that the school is providing, whatever that looks like, the pictures, the button, the whatever it is it giving them a way to interact socially and have relationships and friendships? Okay.
Okay.
Number two, the right to request desired objects, actions, events, and people. Okay. So now not only do we need to make sure that we can interact socially with our friends by saying, "Hey, how are you? What's up? What'd you do over the weekend?" Whatever that looks like. We also now need to have objects, foods, drinks, toys, okay? Actions, right? So things you want to do. I want to go. I want to move. I don't want to be here.
Get me out of here.
Yeah, go away. Events, right? What's happening today? Where are we going? What's my schedule? Okay. And people. Where's mom?
Yeah.
Where's Susie? What, right? So is whatever they have provided for your child to communicate, including a way to request all the things that they might want to have: objects, actions, events, and people. Okay.
Mhm.
Number three, the right to refuse or reject undesired objects, actions, events, or choices. So I'm going to stop on this one because I think this is very important.
Yeah.
Our students, our kids have a right to say no, even when we don't like it, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, every child, every child does this, right? They say no, they stomp their foot, they don't want to. Okay. And does their communication system that is being provided to them in the educational setting include a way for them to, and I'm going to say safely, okay?
Yes.
Because we know if we do not give our students a way to say no, to refuse, to reject, to not pick the choices you have given them safely, they will have a behavior instead. Okay.
Right.
Right.
To communicate that. Yeah.
In order to communicate that. Right. So
Yeah.
if we can give them words like no, I don't want to, I don't like it, go away, not right now, whatever that looks like for your child, making sure that whatever that system that the school is providing them, that is also included.
Well, and thinking this is something we have talked about a lot and will not derail this conversation, but again, something I just will not move past without mentioning is as an adult, you have the right to say no.
Mhm.
We talk about things, we don't have to go down the road to discuss what you're consenting to or why that's important, but you have the right to say no as an adult. So if you are taught as a 3, 4, 5, 6 year old that you don't get to consent or you don't get to say no, then you stop saying no.
Mhm.
And that is a very unsafe situation.
Yes, and that should be a whole other podcast.
It should be. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So just knowing that our we need to have our students, your child, if you're a parent, your child needs to have a way to refuse and reject what is happening if they don't like it.
And even simply like that, yes, sure, that can go down a dark and dangerous road. But also the student needs the opportunity to be like, I hate math. I just don't want to do this because guess what? Their neighbor gets to say, I'm not doing math now. And sure, does that result in a conversation? Maybe some bargaining, some negotiation as you're like, well, it's kind of your job. We got to, yeah, all of that is the
Consequences, you
communication.
don't do it now, you're taking it home for homework.
Right. And all of that involves communication. So you need access to communication to be able to have that negotiation. But
Yes.
also thinking in those times, the student has the right to be like, I don't like this. I don't like this story. Can you give me another one? Or even just like, I'm not doing math today, in the same way that their neighbor gets to say that.
Mhm.
Is it an option to refuse those things, not ever do them? No, in the same way, it's not that option for everybody else.
But they have a right
But
to
you
say
do
it.
get to say it.
You get to
Yes.
say it. You get to say it.
Ooh, we're right on cue with that.
You still get to say it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, our next one is the right to express personal preferences and feelings, right? So does this communication system, this whatever it is, buttons, pictures, device, sign language, whatever
Yeah.
it is that they're using, um, does it include words to express preferences and feelings? I don't like that. That's my favorite. Um, and then just all of your feelings. I'm sad. I'm hungry. I'm tired. I don't feel good. My stomach hurts. I have a headache. I'm sad. All your feelings. You gotta
Yeah.
all the feelings.
Well, and thinking about a younger elementary student who you maybe have that communication sheet that goes back and forth.
Mhm.
And that communication sheet may say on it, a lot of times we see on those things that it's like the favorite part of my day. And how many times is that question answered by the grown up who is with the student? Because that student doesn't have access to be able to say what the favorite part of their day actually was.
Right.
Because you may expect like, oh, we played basketball in gym class and he certainly loves basketball. So I bet that was his favorite. However, maybe the story we read in English language arts about the fish actually was his favorite.
Mhm.
And it's those types of conversations that maybe the adults around students are interpreting for themselves or they're I know. I know this kid so well. I know. Like, well, maybe, but today the answer might have been different. So,
Mhm. Yeah. The next one is the right to make choices from meaningful alternatives.
mm, talk
Okay.
about a meaningful alternative.
So having for when I think of this, I think of if a child in some way communicates that they want to eat,
Yeah,
um, and we can't because we're heading out for recess.
right.
Okay. Um, having an alternative of can you wait or do you really need it now? And or also, though, if a child is only provided with 2 or 3 choices, what if none of those choices are what he wants,
Right.
right? So, being very limited on the buttons or the words or the pictures or what we've provided, I think really gets us can kind of get us into that situation.
Hmm.
Because or even, it's snack time and you're like, "Do you want the cookies or the chips?" What if they don't want either one of those?
Right. And what if they're full? They don't want anything.
Right. They just or yeah, or they don't want anything. Right? So, an ability to say, "No, none of these," or
Hmm.
having more than just 2, right? Because they really want the applesauce or the yogurt, you didn't even give them that choice. Right? So,
Isn't that, yeah, think about as an adult when you open up your cabinet, for me, it's upstairs here. You open up the cabinet and then you're like, can I imagine what it would feel like if I only had like shelves of two things and that's all I ever got?
that's it. Yeah.
That seems terrible. Maybe some people really like that. That's awesome. But guess what? If you have 25 options and you still go for the same two every time, that's fine. But you
That's
still have the
right.
25 option.
But just give them the 25. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, okay. So our next one is the right to make comments and share opinions. Right. So I think a lot of times, and I will say like, being a speech therapist for a very long time, and I've worked with some pretty, complex communication disorders. Um, if we're not careful, we get really into just giving them lots of nouns, right? So far we've talked, all well, they have 25 choices of snacks.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is really great. We want that. But then we also want them to be able to make comments about things like, that's cool. I like it. I don't like it. That's pretty. That's ugly. I hate it. Yuck. Right. So to
Yeah.
not get, look, right? Awesome, right? So to not get stuck into only requesting and labeling, but providing those other fun words that we use to make comments and share our opinions on things.
Well, and I think being able to, again, take it back to that like empathetic perspective as an adult, can you imagine if the only communication you had was labeling things like
Right.
notebook, pen, phone, iPad?
Yeah.
When really it's like I'm out of paper in my notebook and my phone is almost dead.
My laptop actually died.
It did actually do that.
It did.
And
But
like these are the neat, but more than like, what am I supposed to say? Like notebook? And then you're like, what about it? Paper? Well, what about that? And if you can't
notebook
say more paper, that,
need,
yeah,
want.
now,
Mhm. Yeah. And I think it's good to always kind of be when we're talking about like commenting and sharing opinions and like choosing vocabulary, I think a really good thing is especially if you're a parent out there and you have a child who's not speaking and then you have a child who is, uh listen to them, okay? Because I have a very, verbal 14-year-old now, but when he was younger, everything was stupid.
yeah,
Math is stupid. Whoever created it was stupid. Right?
yeah,
Now, was it the greatest thing for him to say? No. But did he have the right to say it? Absolutely.
hmm,
That's how he felt.
yeah,
So keeping
right,
in mind that, like, uh, you know, it is what I mean, kids think things are stupid and they don't
Yeah.
like it and I don't want to do it and it's too hard. I mean, think about how many times, right? Just and if you walked into a fifth grade classroom, the things you would hear, right? Like,
Yeah.
"Ooh, you know, this is too hard. Why do we even have to learn this? This is stupid." Right? Like,
Mhm.
I'm never going to use this. And you're right, you're not. But but right,
Yeah,
all
but you're
of
learning it
these
anyway.
that's what our kids are saying. So, you know, just having that in mind of like they not only to request and label, but the ability uh to make comments and share opinions. And you know, honestly, when you start looking at like if you are having all of these words, those are the words they're going to use to build relationships.
I was just gonna go back to that. Yes.
It
How do
right?
you build a relationship? You're like, "Oh, you think the same way that I do." I mean, this is how
We
grown-ups make relationships. That's how you and I have made one, is that we speak the same language about
Mhm.
so many things. But
Yeah.
if but that's because we are both sharing in that language, and you need to be able
Mhm.
to do that with somebody to build that relationship.
Right. Oh, your favorite movie is Inside Out too. I mean, you know, I've that's the movie that is out now,
Yeah.
so it's on my mind. But yeah, making those, but you have to have the vocabulary and access to the words in order to share those things. Um, the right to ask for and give information, including information about changes in routine and environment. Okay, so in order to ask, you have to have question words available.
Mhm.
Right?
Why are we doing this?
Why?
Yeah.
Where? Where is Susie? Susie sits by me. Where's Susie? So I need access to the word where, and I also need access to my classmates and my teachers' names. I know we're not going to put pictures on them. Can't violate whatever, but we can have first names. Okay, there's a million Susies in Louisville. It's fine. Um,
And
so
I would also argue that we're we're also these other children have access to what these other children look like all the time in a
they do.
classroom.
They do. They do. But yeah, so making sure, right? So you need to be able to ask questions. Who are you, right? If there's a
Mhm.
substitute teacher, who are you? Why are you here? How long do we have to do this? When is this over?
Yeah,
And where is my teacher? You know,
yeah,
and what's for lunch?
yeah.
Why is my schedule different? Why
When
did
do
you move
these
the
in
table?
class?
Why did you change the arrangement of my seat today? Right. So
Yeah.
question words. You got to have question words. The right to be informed about people and events in one's life.
That's a big one.
It is. It is. It is. Yeah.
I will this will also you and I can go down a big road with this. I will say that it is to us, so we hope to other people, it is important that people have a really good understanding about what is happening to people around them and why these things are happening to people around them and
Mhm.
how these things might affect you and your schedule and your routine. But also, it isn't our job as the grown-ups in these situations to determine whether or not somebody needs that information, or do we not give it because they won't understand it.
Or we assume that they won't understand.
Right. It's not our job. There is absolutely no problem in giving somebody the information about so and so's not here because their grandma died. And that
Yeah,
is really sad. It
it is.
is. Or, you know, that may happen to you yourself. And whether or not this student, your child, fully understands what you're saying doesn't mean that you can't say those words to them, and
Mhm.
doesn't mean that we don't tell the full story because we've determined that somebody isn't going to understand this.
Right.
That you have a right to hear this information and you have a right to know the information in the same way that everybody else in your space also is hearing that and has a right to hear that.
Yes. Yep. Um, but also, you know, if something is sad, you know, do we have access to the word sad?
Yeah. And like
And then do we
really super scary sad.
super
Like,
and
yeah,
when we build relationships, when Susie comes back, something we could say to Susie is, "I'm sorry you're sad,"
yeah,
because that's how
yeah.
friends talk to each other,
Mhm.
right? It all comes back around, right? Like, yes.
Yep.
Um, okay. Number 9, the right to access interventions and supports that improve communication. Okay. Um, so accessing interventions and supports, right? So having access to the services they need to
Like
improve,
access to your services.
right? Yeah. A speech therapist has specific, right, education and training. That's what we're here for. In language and how to use language and how to put words together, right? And yes.
And how to teach somebody how to do that. I think that that's
Yeah.
something else that we will be talking about later when we talk about communication systems. But deciding what that communication system is for a student hopefully should be a group effort and should be based on the student's strengths. We will discuss that.
Mhm.
But also recognizing that in almost every situation, that student has to be taught how to use this system.
Yes.
So that the intervention needs to happen so that that learning and that skill building can take place.
Yes. And that does not happen by chance.
Correct.
Okay. Students do not learn to communicate
On accident.
just because you put something in front of them.
Yeah.
And that can be another. Um, okay. Number 10, the right to have communication acts acknowledged and responded to, even when the desired outcome cannot be realized. Okay.
Like, I want to go to the beach now.
I'm sorry, Shannon, we can't go to the beach right now. That is, we
Why
have
not? Why not?
to because we can't afford it.
Okay.
Whatever it is, because we have to,
But that's the real life. That's the real
that's
life
real life, right?
conversation. Yes.
Yes, right. So yes, the child has a right to request the cookies 20 times in a day, and we do not remove the cookie button or the
Yes.
cookie picture from their communication board because we don't want them to ask. So
Right.
we have to respond with no, there are no more cookies in the cabinet because you have eaten them all.
Right. They're gone.
They're gone. Right?
Classroom
Even if you have to
classroom
say it
situation.
20 times.
Yes. Classroom situation. We do not take away the communication system because a student is disruptive by saying the word blue over and over again. Yep. Is that annoying?
It
It
is.
sure is. But so is this other kid talking about who knows what every day. But we
Pokemon.
don't take away his voice, do
No,
we?
we do not. We do not. We do not. So yeah. So even when you can't give them what they want, they still have a right to be acknowledged. We do not ignore their communication. Do not ignore them. The right to have ugh, number 11. The right to have access to functioning AAC, augmentative and alternative communication, and other AT or assistive technology services and devices at all times.
Okay, stay tuned for a future episode because we
Future
cannot
episode, they
start
should
that
have their
now
communication system with them all
all the
the
time.
time. All the time. If they are using a PEX book, that PEX book should be with them all the time. If they have a speech device, it should be with them all the time, unless it's water play, okay? But still, all the time. If they have a communication board, it should be with them all the time.
Period.
Function. It should be functioning and with them. Okay. So charged, turned on, and with them. The right to access environmental contexts, interactions, and opportunities that promote participation as full communication partners with other people, including their peers.
including their peers, educational experiences beyond this story was about frogs,
Right.
and frogs start as tadpoles. All great information,
All
all
great.
wonderful things to
Mhm.
participate in the lesson. But also, when we start talking about access to conversations with
Yes.
peers, we have to have something more than that,
And to be as full communication partners. That
not
means
partial.
right, full. That means Johnny says he hates frogs. I should be able to say me too, or I love frogs, or frogs are gross.
Yeah, you're wrong. They're not bad.
They're not bad. Okay, number 13. The right to be treated with dignity and addressed with respect and courtesy.
I don't even yes.
Yes,
It's a
right?
it's a little it's a little hard to think that that even has to be explicitly stated,
Mhm.
but even beyond communication, that is just important for people living in the world with people.
Yes. I think for me, in the school setting, keeping in mind that regardless of what a piece of paper says about, well, they're 16, but they're actually on the level of a whatever year old. Okay. No, they're 16.
They are 16. They've been
They are.
alive for 16 years.
So let's treat them and speak
Yes.
to them as a 16-year-old and have expectations of boundaries and space and how we communicate and what's appropriate and not appropriate for a 16-year-old.
You know what's this is I said I wasn't going to do this, but here we are. Uh what what is interesting about that and how important that is, I
Mhm.
think, to highlight that that doesn't happen so often. I was talking to a coworker, another therapist earlier today, and she was talking about her company was audited, and one of the comments about her documentation was that she used she didn't use the phrase age appropriate, but she used adult things and adult language for adults and child kid things for a child. So even if you're talking about somebody with an intellectual or developmental disability that maybe is interested in watching something that a younger kid watches and they're
Mhm.
an adult, you still are offering them an adult experience because they are an adult. And the fact that, I mean, that just struck me when she said that out loud as like, that's important and remarkable because it doesn't happen. And somebody noticed that, oh, you serve adults with developmental and intellectual disabilities, and you are writing about them as if they're adults. And that to an auditor is remarkable.
Wow. That it's not the norm.
So, yeah,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So I think, yeah, I think that that is kind of when I read into that about being treated with, dignity and respect, regardless of what their interests may be, even if their interests are, cartoons that are of those that are usually younger, they're still, you know, treat them as they are their age and have the expectations,
Yeah,
right? Um, so I think this is just another one that ties right. They were the right to be addressed directly and not be spoken for or talked about in the third person while present, right? And this is something that even so, I at my clinic, parents are in the room or always in the room with us, which is actually a really also rare thing that we always
yeah,
have parents involved in our sessions. But this is something that I'm actually very careful about when a parent wants to talk about a behavior that happened or something going on. It's like, let's wait a minute
yeah,
and do this a different way. Um,
yeah,
I want to be very careful about talking about our students in
yeah.
front of them like they're not there.
Which
Or
is it's also hard when you're having a conversation with another adult and you're having it about somebody. Similar parents when I'm at somebody's house. It happens. I try so hard to catch myself when I'm there in somebody's house and I say he when it's really you. And
Right.
I
Yes.
can say that you seem like instead of he seems like he really likes this, you seem like you really like it. Sure, I am talking to his mom because we are engaging in this conversation, but you're here and I'm making an assumption based on your behavior that you really like what we're doing. And it's okay for me to say, you seem like you really like this. And
Mhm.
hopefully, what happened this morning was that I got a big reaction and I was like, oh, I must be right. Okay, great. Love this
Right.
for all of
Right.
us.
Yeah. And I've been I a situation right now with a teenager that I work with who's been having some big behaviors at school.
Mhm.
And conversations have had to happen. But I have actually been very open and with the teenagers in the room with us, and I'm like, you know, um we've got to talk about this, and I know that you've been hearing us talk about this, but I have to have this conversation with your parent so that your parent can help you through the situation, you know.
Yeah,
And but also me saying, at any time if there's something that we're talking about that bothers you, like, you can ask us to stop, right? And
absolutely.
I've had teenagers who will be like, shh. I'm like, got it. So right. So but because sometimes I think though, just making sure that if that conversation, like, because I don't always have somebody else to be with the patient for us to talk, but
Right.
like, oh, could you send me a could you message me about that, could you message me so we can talk about that, or just saying, hey, we need to have a conversation, and we're going to be talking about this, and you can be a part of this conversation, but making sure that that you are telling the person, hey, this is what we're going to be talking about, and even
Yeah.
asking them if it's okay to talk about it.
Yeah. I think that's
Yeah.
I know that we share a client and have for years, and that mom is so good about saying, "Is it okay if I share this? Is it okay that we talk about this? Is
Mhm.
it?" And it just and even she may start kind of similar to that when I say he, I'm like, "Ooh, you, this is you are here." And
Yes.
and she may start to say something, but she catches herself so quickly and she's like, "Hey, is it okay that we talk about this?"
Right. Right. And yeah, and with this current teenager, I've been having to say, I know that for the last 3 weeks, you've heard me talk to mom and now dad, and is this okay? And I kind of look, and I get a smile, and I'm like, okay, but if any time this is not okay, I need you
Mhm.
to somehow let me know. So I think just just making sure that we are just acknowledging that they are here. The person is here. They can hear everything you're saying, and we
Yeah.
should presume that they are understanding everything. Our last one is the right to have clear, meaningful, and culturally and linguistically appropriate communications. Um, yes. So, right, the culturally ties into that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, being aware of cultural differences. That's part of, I'm sure you in your professional organization, but part of our CEUs has to be on cultural competence, like, right? So, realizing that cultural differences exist and how things are
Yeah.
talked.
And it's not our job as therapists or teachers or professionals to determine what may or may not be important for somebody.
Right. So kind of like just wrapping all that up, I think having the printout of the communication bill of rights and being able to, for a parent or even for a professional to come from a standpoint, like if you are a speech therapist and you are setting up some kind of communication system for a student, is this communication system hitting on all 15 of these rights?
Right.
Something they can have with them all the time. They're going to be able to comment. They're going to be able to request. They're going to be able to ask questions. They're going to be able to build friendships. It um, it includes things that they enjoy and the people in their life and the ability to say no and the ability to reject, and is it culturally appropriate as well, right?
Right.
And then as a parent being able to say, okay, I hear that you are saying that you are providing them with this means of communication. How does this picture board give them the ability to reject? Can you show me how this communication system is allowing them to say no, or I don't like it, or I don't want to, or
Yeah.
stop?
And how does this support conversations with peers and teachers that are outside of what may be happening in a lesson?
Yes. So communication bill of rights.
There we are. We all have a right to communicate.
We do. It is a basic human right.
Sure is. Glad that is specifically defined.
Specifically.
Okay. Thank you so much for going over those. Hopefully that's good information. We will have links so that you can see that. You can print that document so you can take and ask some really specific questions. We will also link Amber's email address so that if you have any specific questions about that, you can get in touch with her and ask questions. Sound good?
Yep. Thanks again for having me on.
All right. Thank